Don't miss Memphis Wrestling Live. Sunday, June 8th, former WWE Women's Champion, The Phenom Jazz, is coming to Memphis Wrestling. Saturday, June 21st, meet Vicky Guerrero live at the Tupelo Furniture Market in Tupelo. Sunday, June 29th, it's James Ellsworth. Saturday, July 12th, Memphis Wrestling returns to Little Rock with former WWE United States Champion Kalisto, along with the Arkansas Travelers for Lucha Wrestling Night. July 17th and 18th, Memphis Wrestling Kids Camp returns. Registration is now open. All tickets are on sale now. Get yours right now at memphiswrestling.tv.
That's right, our 8th annual all episodes Memphis in May. Stay tuned all month as we bring you shows about the history of Memphis wrestling and the current Memphis wrestling. Don't miss an episode. Be there.
On my chest, got me slamming on you lanes. You ain't know you messing with the real dealer from the super kicking body slamming show.
This episode is sponsored by Vitality Chiropractic, your trusted partner in wellness right here in Jonesboro and Newport, Arkansas. At Vitality Chiropractic, we believe in the power of natural healing and the importance of a healthy spine for overall well-being. Life can be hectic, and stress can take a toll on our bodies. If you're experiencing back pain, headaches, or just feeling out of alignment, it's time to make a positive change. Step into Vitality Chiropractic, where our experienced and caring team of chiropractors is dedicated to helping you achieve optimal health. We specialize in personalized chiropractic care tailored to meet your unique needs. Call 870-523-2225 to make an appointment today.
Hey, just a quick reminder, subscribe for $5, $7, or $10 at www.patreon.com/Shootin the Shiznit without a G. That's right, Shootin the Shiznit without a G. Wrestling fans, are you ready? Every Friday night in Osceola, Arkansas, MCW, the legacy continues. Live, hard-hitting, family-friendly wrestling action every Friday night at the MCW Arena, located at 1098 West Kaiser. Doors open at 6:30 and the action starts at 8 p.m. sharp. Don't miss your chance to see the stars of MCW battling out in the ring, rivals, drama, and slam-packed action. Following wrestling superstars are appearing: Chase McCoy, C-Money, LA Hustlers, Party Factor, Zaya Wolf, DJ Cash, JT Williams, Galen Ray, Serpent, 187, Luke, Justice, and many, many more. Be there! Contact Terry Clapp for ringside and VIP seats. MCW every Friday night. This episode is also brought to you by Bear. Eat better, live better. These guys are the best meal prep company in Northeast Arkansas. So get 15% off with our code STSPodClub at bear870.com. That's 15% off. Use our code STSPodClub at bear870.com. Trust Bear for your meal prep needs in Northeast Arkansas. Eat better, live better. bad. We can all help prevent suicide. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline provides 24/7 free and confidential support for people in distress, and also prevention and crisis resources for you and your loved ones. Call 1-800-273-8255.
Shootin the Shiznit, Shootin the Shiznit, best little wrestling podcast in the business. Your host BT and all his guests. You'll never know who he'll have next. Shootin the Shiznit, Shootin the Shiznit, best little wrestling podcast in the business. Shootin the Shiznit.
All right. We're live from 304 Studios in Jonesboro, Arkansas. This is an stspod.club production. All episodes, Memphis in May. And I have my old buddy, my best friend ever. Yeah, how about that logo?
Nice.
That logo, big thank you to C. Vanna, also known as... Forget it. I tried to make a joke and it fell. All episodes, Memphis in May. By the way, this is episode 950 of STS Pod Club. It just made me tired just saying that, Gene. I'm BT. This is Gene Jackson. Gene, I heard on the grapevine that you are the new co-host of WTF News Desk.
That's the rumor. Well, it was a rumor. I guess it's true now because now it's out and there's clips and there's proof. And so, yeah, man. Well, I was just sitting around thinking like, man, I don't have enough podcasts that I'm on. People need more Gene Jackson in their life. So
I didn't know whether when I asked you, I didn't know whether I still owed you or you still owed me something. So it was nice enough for you to come back and say, yeah, it sounds fun. Something new and different to do. I know I mentioned that before on the WTF, but it is one of those things where me and you have helped each other throughout the whole since about 2007 doing podcasts. And I never say no to you when you say something about the USWA Retro. And it's fun to have somebody like that. And we're not here to talk about STSpod.club. We're going to talk about the book, which I have it right here.
Hey now. All right.
I have it. And Gene, I had to show this to you because right over here in this section of the studio is all the cassette wrestling news. You can't actually see them, but they're over here. There's 30-something cassettes. And then someone else sent me some cassettes. And I think this came from that stack. But this has just been sitting over there. So I get up from the studio desk and I just pass this every day.
Yeah.
But I've never noticed this.
Oh, look at that.
I have no idea what Pro Wrestling Focus is. Don't know how I got this cassette, really. And it's got Eddie on the front. So it should be interesting to see what that is. I'm thinking it's sort of a shoot interview or whatever. We'll see. Eventually, I'll transfer it and send it over to you and let you listen. Tell the story of how, and let's start all the way back to you was working on an Eddie Gilbert book. When? What year was that?
I was married to my first wife, so that would have been
Good God,
2007, 6, 7, somewhere in there. And I just took a notion like, man, I want to write a book, and started studying on what topic I would want to write about. And I was a big fan of Eddie Gilbert, and I knew there was a lot of misinformation out there about Eddie and his career and how he passed away. And around that time, I had been doing some studying on, saying a popular name to say these days, but, reading some interviews with Ken Wayne about, finding Eddie and different things. And actually later went on to have some conversations with him for the book. But anyway, I reached out to Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert, Mr. Tommy Gilbert, Miss Peggy Gilbert on Facebook, and told them what I was interested in doing and asked them if they would be willing to be involved. And they liked the idea. They were a little apprehensive. They're like, hey, this ain't going to be some kind of, sketchy tell-all thing. I'm like, no, not at all. It's quite the opposite, actually. And I asked them then, I said, do you think Doug would want to be involved? And I remember Miss Peggy, we actually had a conversation on the phone, and she said, well, Gene, Doug still, he's still has a hard time with that. I don't know that he's really ready to talk about that and, really dive into that. She said, so I don't know, but he's busy. He goes to Japan. He does all these things. And so at that point, me and him didn't have a conversation about it. So I started working on the book. I had a lot of conversations with them and interviews, which, it was fortuitous that I had all that still whenever this came back around. But anyway, I started working on the book. I interviewed a lot of people, talked to a lot of different people that were involved in Eddie's life and career. And then I mentioned that was my first marriage. Well, we went through a divorce, and I had a whole lot of stuff go on in my life, and I put that project aside and fortunately never picked it back up again for 15, 16 years until last summer. And I guess I can just continue the story from there. Last summer.
But there's something there. Doug didn't want you to do it, right?
Well, that's...
did he just didn't want to be involved with it at that time?
It's an angle of the story that's kind of unclear.
Okay.
At the time, I was told that he did not. That not only did he not want to be involved, but he didn't want me doing it either. That's what I was told.
And you didn't want to go against I
didn't want to go against his wishes, even though his parents were for it. I didn't want to go against him because, again, my intentions were always I wanted to do right by Eddie and the family and his memory. And so that was another one of the reasons I just kind of dropped it. Plus, I had a long conversation one afternoon with Dutch Mantell. I sent him an email and I was like, hey, Dutch, I'd done a couple of interviews for podcasts with him. I say, hey, Dutch, I want to do a book on the life of Eddie Gilbert. And I want to know if you'll talk to me for the book. And within 2 minutes, I get a response. Call me with his phone number. And so I called Dutch back and he goes, hey, me and you've talked a few times now. I said, yes, sir. And he said, you struck me as being a pretty smart guy. And I said, well, thank you. And he goes, well, apparently you're a fucking idiot. Why do you say that, Dutch? And he said, you can't win. He said, you can't win this. He said, if you write the truth, the Gilberts are going to hang you in Town Square of Lexington. And if you tell what they're going to be comfortable telling, the world's going to lash out at you. So why would you do this? And I was like, So we had a long talk, and he said, I'll talk to you about some things, but I don't want it in the book. And so we had a nice chat that afternoon. And then, like I said, somebody called me and was like, hey, Doug don't want you doing this. And I didn't question that. I didn't reach out to Doug myself. I just kind of let it lie because, like I say, I was in the middle of going through a divorce. You remember around that time, I was writing for your website at the time, and it was not a wonderful time in my life by any stretch.
I went through one of them too, I joke to people about, I think everyone should be, there's two things in life that everyone should do. Number one, I think you should work in the restaurant business at least for 6 months. So you'll see what kind of hard fucking labor that is. And number two, go through a divorce. Just divorce somebody, man. Go through one of them. If you can make it through that on the other side, and me and you, we've talked about this before, both super lucky guys to get out of a divorce and find the love of our lives. So it was a good story in the end. But when you have that going on, I merged myself into the website. Is what I did. And I was able to, I quit the wrestling business. I was able to take my kids to wrestling. I was able to do the website. And that's what I did. So the book sits dormant. Now, I want to tell this story before you go to when you're going back. That book is somewhere on a hard drive, some of that information, right? Yeah. And then there's also, if I remember correctly, is a lot of the episodes we did together in the first that are on that hard drive.
Yeah, so I put all the things related to that book and all the old episodes of the podcast that we did on an external hard drive and moved several times in the interim of that. And because it come to a point, well, what happened? I put all that stuff in a hard drive, and then I'm like, well, I got all these chapters of this book that I'm clearly never going to publish. I'm going to start. At one point, I was writing for your website. You stopped doing your website. I was doing stuff for Blaylock's website, and I started posting like parts of the book on his website. And I guess this is going to kind of force me to tell part of the story I wasn't going to tell. So I got a call one day. It was like, hey, Doug Gilbert wants you to stop posting stuff about Eddie on my website. Okay. I'm not fighting this battle.
Right.
Whatever, dude. So I threw that hard drive in a closet and said, all right, whatever. I guess I can't ever do anything with this. This was a wasted year and a half of my life, but so be it. So I wasted 9 years before that on a marriage. Now I've wasted a year on a book. 10 years total. So be it. Moving on. And really didn't think much. Every once in a while, like I would do a podcast with somebody. Like I did a podcast with this guy, Flynn Hendricks, who's a wrestler up around Nashville, and he just out of the blue was like, hey, I remember one time you were working on a book by Eddie Gilbert. I'm like, yeah. He's like, whatever happened to that? I'm like, nothing. Nothing happened with it. That's what. And anyway, I just kind of forgot about it until last summer. Things were going good. I had started the USWA podcast, and it was picking up steam. And I was doing, the stuff for WrestleCopia. And so people were starting to kind of know me for that. And I'm sitting here one night doing some research for making clips for the podcast for the USWA show. And our mutual friend, Doug McKay, messages me. He's like, hey, guess who I talked to tonight? And it's not like me and Doug are friends, but it's not like we talk every day.
Right. I ain't talked to me and Doug are friends too. I bet it's been
6 months necessarily. Yeah. And so he's like, hey, guess who I talked to tonight? Who? Doug Gilbert. Okay. Guess what he wanted? I'm like, I'm not doing this, Doug. What the fuck did Doug Gilbert want?
Right.
Why are you gonna message me? He's like, well, he wanted to know, he remembered that you're working on a book about Eddie, and he wanted to know if you ever published it, or if not, what you did with it. He wants to talk to you. And I said, well, frankly, he's the reason I didn't ever publish it. So sure, I'll talk to him. And so he gave me Doug's number, and I waited a week or so and called Doug, and we had a conversation, and he was like, hey, I was wanting to know if you ever did that book. And so, I told him, I said, well, no, I stopped it because, I was told that you didn't want me posting it online. And he says, well, I didn't ever say that. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Whatever. It is what it is. 15 years ago. Who gives a shit at this point? But I was like, okay, well, fair enough, man. He's like, well, what'd you do with it? I was like, it was on a external hard drive. He's like, you still got it? I said, I don't know. I said, I've moved a bunch of times. I probably don't, honestly. He's like, well, can you look for it? And I was like, yeah, I'll look for it. But at the time, I'm going to be honest, I was pretty busy with that podcast, had different stuff going on. I'm like, man, I don't want to rehash this right now.
Right.
I don't have time for this. So I looked around the house for it. I couldn't find it. The only thing I could figure is like, well, it might be at my parents' house, because there was a lot of stuff that in between, like the divorce and moving around, I left some things at their house that I was like, well, I don't need this anytime soon. I thought maybe amongst it.
We all do that.
Yeah. Anyway, me and Doug have several more conversations in between, and he's like, well, man, I'm just, Eddie's not with us anymore. My dad's not around. My mom's not around. And I just really want to get these stories out there about my brother and my dad. And
I want to say something as you're saying this. I want to say something. I've read some of the book, not a lot, because I just got it. And I've listened to every episode of the podcast. If you don't listen to Doug talking about his brother, I know people are going to say, well, BT, you're supposed to. There's so much love for Eddie with Doug that it's heartbreaking sometimes. You're just sitting there going, man, this guy idolized his brother. He cared so much about him. And just, to me, I'm like, and me and Doug's had our talk that we had many years ago. But I hope that's, water under the bridge kind of thing. But I feel for the guy. I'm like, I wish Eddie was alive for Doug. Of all, this is something that comes if you're reading the book and you don't get that, you're not getting it, because there's that just a few pages I got to read, you could just hear him talking about his brother and how excited he was to actually put all this to paper, so someone else can read it. All right, go ahead.
And I'm glad that I got to, and I'll get to this more as we go along here, but I'm glad this all kind of worked out the way it did. But I'm glad that I started this years ago where I got the chance to talk to his mom and dad, because talking to them, and especially Miss Peggy, she was able to convey to me the feeling was mutual. Eddie loved Doug just as much as Doug loved him, thought the world of him. They were as close as brothers could be, and traveled the roads together and everything. And so I was able to get a lot of insight from them and add to the book. It may have been things that maybe they had never even said to Doug, So there were some things that me and him talked about. I'm like, yeah, your mom told me this. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, cool.
Right.
So anyway, I told him, I said, yeah, that's cool, man. People love Eddie Gilbert. I said, people would love to hear those stories. I said, have you ever thought about, I said, a book's a lot of work. I don't know that I really have a time to rehash all that. And I said, honestly, Doug, I don't think I have this hard drive. I think I've lost all that. I said, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? Now, bear in mind, me and him barely know each other at that point. I'm not insinuating me. I'm just saying that's the natural progression of things, that people do podcasts. So I said, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? He's like, not really. He said, I don't listen to them. He said, but, I guess he said, so what would that involve? I said, well, you would just, find somebody you trust and each week sit down and pick out what y'all want to talk about, pick a topic and just tell stories, you sit in front of a computer, and then do this, either Zoom or StreamYard or whatever, they decide to use. And so he goes, well, you do podcasts, don't you? And I'm like, nah, I've been known to do a couple. Yeah. And he said, well, would you be interested? And I said, oh, yeah, I guess I could make time to do another one. And so we got to talking, and then we met up in Jonesboro at that event there, the Legends thing, and pretty much recorded some things and announced it that day. We'd already decided before that we were going to do it. And something strange that I really haven't talked about publicly anywhere before, but one of the things me and Doug had talked about, and one of the reasons he considered this on the front end, when I said, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? He said, well, I haven't. He said, but who's been on me wanting to do a podcast? He did one for a little bit, and he's wanting to do one now. And I said, who? He said, Sid. Vicious?
Wow. Yeah.
He's like, yeah. He's like, Sid wants to do, he said, he wants us to do a podcast. And he said, I told him, I said, Sid, I don't know anything about doing a podcast. He said, so if we do one, he'll probably want to sit in with us at least, like once a month or something. I'm like, that'd be freaking amazing. I love Sid. I would love to hear his stories. So that was a big selling point for me as well, so. Real
quick, I'm going to pitch a Patreon, and remember, I have a Sid Doug Gilbert story. I probably told it on this show, but it'll fit right with the Patreon on this. So remember that.
All right. I'll remember that. So anyway, we start I think it was last August, we start the podcast, and I think we were like 2-3 episodes in. I'm at work one day and I look at my phone and I see, Sid Vicious has passed away, which now Doug told me when he mentioned Sid, he goes, now nobody knows this. You can't say anything. He said, but Sid's got cancer. I'm like, oh, what? Wow. And he's like, yeah, Sid's got cancer. He's like, but that's why he's wanting to tell his stories, And I was like, oh, wow, that's terrible. So I look at my phone and it says, Sid has passed away. So I immediately screenshot it and sent it to Doug. I was like, is this true? And he put back, unfortunately so. And I was like, oh, wow, man, that's awful. So we did a episode about him that week. And
yeah, and I had, you never know what guys, the boys are close to what boys and all that stuff. Yeah. But you could tell Doug was real close to Sid, and really good episode. And I'm gonna throw something out there, because I think the podcast is so interesting, and I'll be honest with you, I started listening because of you, and not because of Doug, because I was never a fan of Doug's per se, because we'd had an altercation, and just never. There was a perception of Doug from that he only got the places he got was because Eddie brought him in, kind of thing. And so I never looked at his work until you started working with him. I started watching his matches and knowing that he went to Japan. He was the booker. Eddie wasn't over there during that time.
No.
And just listening to him talk about the business and knew what the business was. I mean, as weird as it is, I become a fan of Doug Gilbert after all these years, which is crazy. But and I'm going to say this, as we were at the con, I was talking to you. I went over to somebody else, and somebody else, he said, is it something about a podcast? And I said, yeah, they're fixing it. Just wait till Gene announces who he's going to do one with. He said, hey, if he does it with Doug, blah, blah, blah. Doug's not always, everybody's favorite guy, right? And everybody's got their own perception of what's going to happen if you do business with Doug. Apparently, you have easily done business with Doug with no throwback there.
I had so many people. Once we announced that, I had so many people reach out to me and go, you don't want to deal with Doug Gilbert. You don't want to do business with Doug Gilbert. And I told each one of them, and I still do, like, now, I'm like, look, man, I treat people based on how they treat me. Like, I'm sorry if you've had bad dealings with somebody, and man, from the time we started to we recorded an episode last night, Doug has been nothing but great to me. Absolutely nothing but great. He's been easy to deal with. We have a lot of fun with this podcast. He helped me out in a ton of different ways with that Philadelphia trip. He called Joel Goodhart, made sure that I was able to get into my hotel room at 9:00 in the morning instead of the check-in time of 2, and just all kinds of stuff. And, to jump ahead a minute, we did a few episodes, and then we recorded an interview with Tommy Rich in Jackson, Tennessee at the Hall of Fame. And Doug had been saying, like, hey, Tommy will come on every now and again. But we recorded that one in person, and Tommy had a great time. And so after that, Tommy would message Doug, because him and Doug talk literally every day.
Right. They're like brothers.
Times.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so he's like, hey, Tommy wants to know when we're going to have him back on. I said, anytime he wants. So we had him back on. He did the new Fabulous Ones. And Tommy kind of jokingly said at the end after we stopped recording, he said, man, I do this every week with y'all. I said, why don't you? Doug said, yeah, why don't you? He said, can I? I said, well, of course. Hell yeah. He's like, all right. So, it became dangerous conversations with Doug and Tommy. And I had people message me like, hey, man, those guys aren't going to keep going. They're not going to do this. They're not going to do this. They're not dependable. They're calling me every week. Hey, what time are we recording? Hey, what if we talk about this? Like, they're super excited about it. They have a great time. Like, Tommy,
hey, I'm glad that, I'm glad that no one has been able to say, I told you so. So yeah. I am really proud of that. And I've stressed this to you in private, and we've been friends. We've known each other forever, but proud of what you're doing, proud of being able to say, hey, Gene's worked a long time. And finally, people are being able to see the podcast and you deserve everything you're going to get, especially with the books and everything. We're supposed to be talking about this damn book, so I'm going to take a commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the book. That's right, our 8th annual all episodes Memphis in May. Stay tuned all month as we bring you shows about the history of Memphis wrestling and the current Memphis wrestling. Don't miss an episode. Be there.
On my chest, got me slamming on you lame. You ain't know.
Wrestling fans, are you ready? Every Friday night in Osceola, Arkansas, MCW, the legacy continues. Live, hard-hitting, family-friendly wrestling action every Friday night at the MCW Arena, located at 1098 West Kaiser. Doors open at 6:30 and the action starts at 8 p.m. sharp. Don't miss your chance to see the stars of MCW battling out in the ring, rivals, drama, and slam-packed action. Following wrestling superstars are appearing: Chase McCoy, C Money, LA Hustlers, Party Factor, Zaya Wolf, DJ Cash, JT Williams, Galen Ray, Serpent, 187, Luke Justice, and many, many more. Be there! Contact Terry Clapp for ringside and VIP seats. MCW every Friday night. Hey, I want to talk about one of our sponsors, Bear. B-A-R-E, period. That's right. Their tagline is Eat Better, Live Better. And I'm speaking from experience here. That's right. The better things you put in your body, the better you feel. These guys are the best meal prep company in Northeast Arkansas because, well, they prep all my meals and they don't put any of those artificial flavorings or seasonings in their food. It's just the bare ingredients. You see what I did there? Here's how it works. You choose the meals you want in your desired pickup location from their easy-to-use website. Your meals are ready Monday morning and available for pickup based on the hours of the location. They have 7 locations right here in Jonesboro, 2 in Paragould and 1 in Brooklyn. Go to bear870.com and place your order today. So here's what I want you to do. Get 15% off with our code STSPodClub at bear870.com. That's 15% off and use our code STSPodClub. Trust Bear for your meal prep needs in Northeast Arkansas. Eat better, live better. Bear. Are you enjoying the episode? Well, Cash App us. That's right. $BTSTS. You don't have Cash App? Download it and get $5. That's right. $5. That's $BTSTS. $BTSTS.
Hey there, pleasure seekers. Get ready to elevate your intimate moments with the one and only Spunk Lube Pure Silicone, the go-to choice for a slick and sensational experience. Introducing the 8-ounce bottle of Spunk Lube Pure Silicone, available now at spunklube.com. It's not just lube, it's an invitation to a world of heightened pleasure and comfort. Picture this: silky smooth, long-lasting, and oh so sensual. Whether you're flying solo or exploring with a partner, Spunk Lube Pure Silicone is your passport to pleasure paradise. Let the passion flow as Spunk Lube Pure Silicone intensifies the connection, providing the slipperiest, most luxurious experience you've ever imagined. Go to spunklube.com today.
Live wrestling entertainment. Natural State Wrestling is thrilled to bring the excitement of live independent pro wrestling to the Mosquito Festival in LaCroix, Arkansas on May 31st. Hey, this event is free and it promises an unforgettable experience showcasing a stacked lineup of wrestling talent from across the region. From high-flying luchadors and celebrated local legends to rising stars, fans of all ages will be treated to thrilling high-octave matches, including a huge battle royal that will keep everyone on the edge of their seat. Beyond the wrestling action, the Mosquito Festival offers a variety of attractions to enjoy, including delicious food, carnival rides, games, live music, and much more, assuring fun for all ages and budgets. Natural State Wrestling is honored to be part of the vibrant community event and looks forward to delivering top-tier entertainment for festival goers all over Arkansas. Bell time is 1 p.m. and mark your calendars and join us as Natural State Wrestling takes over the Mosquito Festival. Follow the Mosquito Festival on Facebook for updates, all the amazing attractions, and activities planned for this year's events. That's right, May the 31st, 1 p.m. Be there! All right, back from commercials. I do want to thank all the sponsors. We've had a great time here in Memphis in May. Well, all episodes, Memphis. I got to pause here. In May. This past Monday, we had the last episode of The Record Store with the special guest, me. I was a guest host.
Hey.
You'll have to go back and listen to that. You'll see them on the screen here. Moon Main, I reviewed that. And then we got a special guest coming later on this week. I'm not going to spoil that. Probably early Friday morning. So it's got something to do with Memphis.
Gene,
let's talk about do what now?
Look at you not spoiling.
No, can you believe it? If you follow us on the USWA podcast, you know that's what I like to do.
Killing your gimmick, man.
Let me tell you. Now I'm gonna say something, but it's not supposed to be criticism. Okay, I'm gonna say it ahead of time that it's not. This book reminds me of those books that you used to get that say somebody did an unauthorized book on a famous person. Okay.
Yeah.
But this is more inside. Don't get me wrong on that. But Doug stresses in the book, and I know you helped him write it, but he stresses in the book, it's not a lot of negativity in this book. He wants to talk about Eddie and his love for Eddie and all the good things that Eddie did. And he's done that with you on the podcast too. He don't want no negativity on the podcast. Every once in a while he'll start shooting on somebody. But what did that all surprise you that the Doug Gilbert that we supposedly knew didn't want to shoot and didn't want to be the bad guy on everything?
Yeah, pleasantly, because he was very upfront about that when we started talking about, doing a podcast. He's like, he said, I know there's certain people that their whole podcast exists so they could just get on there and shit on people every single week. He said, I don't have any interest in that. He said, I want to talk about what's good with the business. He said, I want to talk about fond memories, happy memories, things that people want to remember. He said, I don't want to talk about all the bad stuff. And I was like, hey man, right on. I'm good with that. And so when we got this offer to do the book, it's a long story and it's not even worth going into as far as like how the offer came around, but he called me and, it's like first week of January. And, he said, I know we kicked around the idea of doing a book. He said, but I've got an offer now, a legitimate offer. He said, I can send you over a contract. He said, where somebody wants to do a book. And he said, published in, like through all that. He said, it's not self-published. Right. That. I'm like, okay. And, he said, but, he said, they're wanting to do it about like my whole family. And he said, but, I was thinking, what if we just did the book we wanted to do? I wanted to do a book. You wanted to do a book. We never did it. He said, what if we, tag team this thing and do a book about Eddie? And I said, yeah, absolutely. He said, okay. He said, well, they want it done by the end of April. I said, Doug, it's January, right? He's like, yeah. I said, you think we could write a damn book by, the end of April? And he's like, I don't know, man. He said, we might need to put put the podcast on hiatus and, but you think we can do it? I was like, well, he said, that's when the Vice thing's coming out. That's why they want to try to get it out around the same time. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Right. Like, all right. So I never found the hard drive, but I got to searching around and realized that a good it hit me. I was sitting here one day in my room and I was thinking about, me and Doug spent all this time talking about Eddie. I was thinking about my brother that passed away last January. And I remembered him telling me what he thought about part of that book. Because, he remembered the Gilberts growing up. And I had sent it right. And I'm like, how did I send that to Whit? And I was like, oh, I sent it through Google Drive. And I'm like, well, no, it's not on my Google Drive. I use it every day. I'm like, wait a minute, I have two. I have a Gene Jackson Google Drive, but I have a Google Drive under my shoot name. Let's just see. And I go, and lo and behold.
Oh, wow.
3/4 of what I had written was on this Google Drive. And I'm like, holy shit. So I called Doug, like, you are not going to believe what I've just found. And so I tell him, and he's like, wow, that helps this whole thing out a lot. So, and basically all got rewritten, but it was a lot of research I didn't have to redo. And, and jogging Doug's memory about dates and timelines and stuff like that. So it helped out tremendously. But yeah, people criticize and, they say, well, people have criticized the Dark Side episode and say, oh, they just act like all they did was take a few painkillers and, people are going to gripe about the book that there's not a lot of negativity in there, but it's like, it's a book by his brother. What do you think it's going to be? You think Doug's going to talk about a bunch of negative stuff? If you want to know all that, you obviously already know it. You've obviously heard it somewhere. Why do you think you're going to hear it from his brother? I'm
going to tell you, that's the part that I've read 2 or 3 chapters here and nothing more comes through. And I said that on the first part of this is that the love of his brother. And then, you mentioned that, Eddie took him everywhere. The first time I saw Doug, now how old is Doug? Me and Doug are close to the same age, right?
Yeah, he's like 59.
Yeah. We were, first time I saw Doug, I was at Blythe, Arkansas at a spot show, and he was standing in the heel dressing room. The heel dressing room had a awning on it, and he was standing outside the door. He wasn't working yet. He was too young to work, but I thought, damn, he's huge, and then I asked somebody who he was, and they said, oh, that's Eddie's little brother is what they said. And I thought that was funny because he was bigger at the time. And then that's the first time I saw Doug. And just one of those things where he was taking him everywhere. He was in Eddie, as y'all talk about this, Eddie was just, wrestling was everything. And he was such a fan. It reminds me of me growing up. I had and I'm saying growing up, but I was in college and had some stupid Japanese wrestling game on the, and I say stupid because it was a PlayStation 1. Everybody was Japanese on it. And when you created a character, they were all Japanese. So I had a Bret Hart, Japanese Bret Hart, and I had all these people. But I did very similar, and I found one of the books not too long ago. I can't read half the handwriting, but he booked shows. He would book the shows, the winners, the losers, all on pieces of paper. And you guys said in the book that he went to those sometimes and used that.
Yeah.
In real life, he used it.
Lance Russell told a story to me. I communicated with Lance the first time around via Shane Russell. And I actually communicated a little bit with Jerry Jarrett some. And Jerry Jarrett had told me back then, and then Doug recounted it, as did Tommy Gilbert, that at one point, Eddie brought some of his notebooks where he had wrote some angles, and he showed those to Jerry Jarrett in the studio one Saturday morning when he was there with his dad, Tommy.
Oh, wow.
And Jerry's like, this is good stuff. Like, and so at that point, Jerry Jarrett thought that Eddie's future would be in booking. Like, he didn't even really like, hey man, don't even worry about wrestling. This is good stuff. And Lance Russell said he always thought that Eddie would get into the business through a combination of his writing, journalism writing, picture taking, and then use that to get a foothold in to be a promoter and a booker. But Eddie wanted to wrestle. One of the most powerful things that I heard from Doug through this process. So early on, and when we started this, I went to Doug's house and he took me out to his shop where he's got like Eddie's, he's got like his ring jackets and he's got all these programs and all this cool stuff. And I took a bunch of pictures of different things and we were sitting and talking. I was recording some things for the book. And, at one point, we were talking about the wreck that he had when he was working for the WWF that, nearly ended his career. And some people say it probably should have, quite honestly.
Before you go any further, he also had an injury before that to his neck that I did not know. Was it football?
Playing football in high school. Yeah,
I read that
before it ever started.
So here we go. A guy that's got a bad neck decides he's still going to go to wrestling, and then he hurts himself again with his neck. But go ahead. Go with the story.
But yeah, so anyway, I asked Doug, just me and him sitting there, I said, let me ask you something. I said, because he was talking about how much Eddie loved wrestling and nothing was going to stop him. We talked about the fact that, the doctors told him after that wreck, like, you're never going to wrestle again. You're going to do good to walk. And within just a few months, he was back in the ring. It's crazy. Like, they never would have let him this day and age. But
no, never.
He's back in the ring. And he goes, but that was Eddie, man. Nothing was going to stop him. He loved wrestling. I said, let me ask you something, Doug. I said, seriously. I said, do you think if a doctor would have sat across from him, looked him in the face and told him, Eddie, if you wrestle, this is the expiration date on your life. You are not going to live past 1995, or you can book, you can do the business side of things, but never get back in the ring. And who's to say how long you're going to live? I said, do you think he would have wrestled? And Doug, without much hesitation, he goes, oh yeah, he would have wrestled. He said he would have wrestled. He loved it that much that he said, now granted, he didn't like the thought of, he knew how much it would hurt all of us to lose him and everything. He said, but he loved it that much. He said, yeah, he would have wrestled. And I was like, wow, that's a powerful statement about, how he felt about the business and then the actual getting in the ring and wrestling part. Because, different times, different people tried to steer him away. Bill Watts tried to make him a manager and, he loved the booking. He definitely wanted to do the booking and he made decisions work-wise and life-wise based on booking, but he always wanted to be in the ring too. That was always a big thing for him. So, but, we talked about that day, like, hey, what do we want to do with this book? And we wanted to write a book that Eddie would be proud of, that his family would be proud of, and that, years from now, if somebody wanted to learn about, like, hey, they heard this name, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. Well, I want to learn about what he was about in the ring and as a person, something that would represent him well, not a bunch of scandalous, all this and that. It was just, I want to know about what kind of person he was and what kind of wrestler he was and what was important to him. And I'd like to think we did that. We're both very, very proud of the book, and
I'm proud of the format. That's the weirdest thing. But that Burt Prentice book, and we know who did that. But those books, I could barely read them because, that has nothing to do with anything but my eyesight. So, no offense to the author of that book, who I can't remember his name right now. By the way, have I told you my name? My name is in that book, by the way.
It is
in the Burt Prentice book. I love the format. I can read the book. I love the pictures. I was shocked that we have colored pictures. Here's my promo for the book. Go out and buy your book right now. But the colored pictures, and they're all really, really good. The pictures are. And one of the things that there's 3 or 4 things that I loved about Eddie Gilbert, angle wise, that I I repeated in my head over and over, and I wanted to do a version of each one of them sometimes. But one of the first ones was one of his first major angle with him and his dad against Buddy and Ken. And Ken and him stayed friends forever because of that. I loved that angle. I didn't expect it was happening. I didn't know it was happening. Tommy and Eddie, the new Fabs. I love that whole angle where he turns and he apologizes. Yeah. So it's actually a repeat of what he had done. But I just loved it. Another one is the angle with Bill Watts when he draped the flag over Bill Watts. And I wanted to do that different in Mid-South, as I've discussed that before. We're not going to talk about that, but it's a bad angle.
Me and Neil Taylor did a version of that with Southern
But y'all
Pride.
did a version of it too. Yes. It would have worked. It really worked too, because they hated y'all like crazy. But I love that angle. But one of the things that was, it shocked me when it happened. And I know most people are going to think, well, it's, him and WCW, blah, blah, blah. It was his matches with Tiger Mask.
Yes.
I mean, he was a kid. He was a local boy. If you think about it, one of the few local guys from Memphis, first local guys that ended up going to WWE without a big name, without anything. And he got to step in the ring with Tiger Mask. And y'all talked about this on the podcast, and I'm assuming it is in the book too, about how Eddie, and you can tell Doug when he's talking about, Eddie was a huge fan of Tiger Mask, and he was just shocked that he was actually being able to work this guy.
Oh yeah, it meant a lot to him that to get to work Tiger Mask, and that's the thing. Had it not been for the wreck, Eddie's style probably would have went a whole different direction. And while Eddie was an innovator with promos and angles and things that he did moving forward, I think Eddie would have been more of an innovator in the ring of like the cruiserweight style and, that sort of thing. But he had to alter his ring style based on the injuries and, turn into more of a Memphis style brawler, which, suited him fine the rest of his career. But yeah, I think he was on the path for having a very, very different style and probably a whole different career if it not had been for that wreck, because he really loved guys like Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid and that style of wrestling, and he was obviously good at it.
I was just I was a shock as a fan, and then as I listened to Doug and him talk about Eddie and everything, and I don't know the answer to this question, but I feel like Tiger Mask was maybe one of those last guys that the guys in the business were marks for. I'm not saying that for a bad thing, but I think they saw his greatness and how fast he was, the things he did that no one else could do, still can't do. You throw in the Ospreys, throw in whoever you want. Go back and watch Tiger Mask. Oh, my God. The speed is unbelievable.
He was proof that wrestling could be something else than what it had been, but still makes sense. Like, Tiger Mask, his matches were death-defying, but they were still within the context of a contest, and it ain't way out here in left field where things would go later on. It still was a lot of believability to Tiger Mask and the things that he did.
Yeah, I'm still a huge fan. I can go back and watch those matches at any time.
Oh, they hold up.
Yeah. Started his career in a little town in Missouri, and I had to mention this, Malden, Missouri, which is it's about an hour from my hometown of Steele. And I booked for 6 months in that town for a guy. But what's this guy's name? Henry? What was his name? What was the guy's name? I can't remember the guy's, but everybody knew his name in Malden. I had no idea who the guy was. I worked some shows first for a guy named, I think his name was Lee Cook, and then worked for another guy where I was the booker. And every time I hear about Malden, Missouri, and people working at Malden, Missouri, I think, well, I was the booker there. But one of the first shows I worked in Malden had Ken there. And Ken was helping booking the shows there. And I'm thinking to myself, these guys never left Malden. They never left Malden. They were still in Malden. And I don't know if you touched this. They touched this on the Dark Side of the Ring. And I wanted to just ask you this because you spent a lot of time with Doug and you really studied Eddie. But do you think, and I know the answer, but what is your thoughts on Eddie working the sheets and stuff? And he was doing all this stuff and getting way before anyone else. They didn't. Okay, so let me bring you to when I was a sheet guy, 86, 87. It was a kayfabe sheet. There was not that many out there. There was maybe 1,200 at the most of people that was reading that. At one time, it was just 800 and something. I remember going up to 2,200 during the before it went, to the internet and all that. This was something that no one talked about. They didn't talk to the sheets. And a lot of the guys used the sheets to see what was going on in all the other territories. Mm-hmm. So Eddie would talk to Dave Meltzer, Wade Keller, and say, this is what's going on here. We're drawing all this. Do you think he was working them to put everybody that was reading it in the business to put him on their radar?
Yes, that's what. So I've studied a lot of those interviews that Eddie did, read and listened to all the audio stuff I could get my hands on, talked to some different people. And Doug agrees with me, but he doesn't read into it as much as I do. But I 100% believe, because at that time, like you say, most of the guys had it drilled in their head. You don't talk to the sheets. You don't talk to the sheets.
You don't even subscribe. And if you subscribe, you don't tell nobody.
And fans don't read that shit anyway. It's a small portion. And it was
very small.
But where Eddie was a genius was Eddie realized, like you said, who does read the sheets? The other workers, the other bookers, the other promoters. He used those to leverage himself into booking jobs and to create a buzz about what he's doing. Because in like Continental, Ron Fuller went out of his way to not talk to the sheets, not even talk to the magazines guy. He barely would get coverage from Apter and them because he didn't want, from everything I've learned, he didn't want coverage of his territory because other promoters would see guys that were getting over, guys that were drawing, and then they would come in and try.
They want to get them. Yeah. If they were making a bunch of money also, this is the wrestling business. If I start a promotion in Jonesboro, Arkansas tomorrow, I said, hey, we're going to do this, and we start drawing huge crowds. Guess what happens? There's a bunch of people trying to promote in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And Fullers were really smart about that. I thought Eddie was so smart about this. We talked to Bob Barnett early on. I think it's episode 36. I'm going to put it in the link for the description of these of this episode, along with the link to you could buy the book also. But I also ended up with 2 cassette wrestling news with Eddie talking to Jeff Osborne.
Mm-hmm.
And those things that they were talking about, I mean, it was the first, Steve Austin calls Cassette Wrestling News the first ever podcast.
Essentially.
It was, yeah. And he was talking smart. I have one with Danny Davis. Danny's talking smart, which is really weird at that time period. But Eddie knew better than anyone else how to get himself over with a different. It was really after this stuff with Dark Side of the Ring, I started looking at other things that he was doing, and like you said, kind of studying. The episode. I went back and listened to the Cassette Wrestling News episodes. I listened to Bob Barnett today. Eddie was there to put Eddie over. Nothing wrong with that, but so freaking smart. Guys, I want to wrap it up right here. I promised Gene I wouldn't keep him long tonight. I just really want to bring Gene over on today to put over the book. The link's going to be in there, but you can tell him real quick how to get to it.
I mean, the best way to get it now, it's out there. You can get it whatever you prefer. Amazon. You can go to Amazon.com, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble. Any of those places, you can just search Eddie Gilbert book and you can order it.
Right.
Because the publisher's website's overwhelmed right now. They've gotten more orders than they were expecting, and they're backed up on shipping people's orders. And so I've got friends that pre-ordered that haven't gotten their books, and people that ordered from Amazon like last week that have their books in hand. And so I would recommend Amazon Books A Million. But yeah, if you're a fan of Eddie, if you're a fan of Doug, check out the book, and also go on YouTube and watch Bob Barnett's shoot interview with Eddie Gilbert. It's the first ever shoot interview. I loved having that as a resource for the book both times I was working on it, because it's the only opportunity you're going to have to hear from Eddie's mouth the reasoning behind a lot of those angles. A lot of people you have to go back and just speculate. Well, I think he did it because of this. Oh, Eddie sits there and he tells you why he did a lot of that stuff, and he had his buddy John Gillum with him, and he told.
Oh yeah, well, Bob actually, like I said, I've been knowing Bob forever, and he was part of the Smart community. And he came on and said, I think he said, if I can remember correctly, one of the first things that happened when they went to the hotel was all the lights went out.
Yeah.
And so that's one part of it's kind of grainy and dark, and that's the reason why. But he mentions Gillum. He mentions that he didn't know Eddie. He just sat down with him to film it and talk to Eddie about various things, and he didn't know. Go out of your way to watch. And then,
one of the funniest stories you'll ever hear is listen to that interview of Eddie telling the story of